Hello, everyone, and welcome to one of the breakout sessions for SaaS Meet 2023, powered by Zylo. In today's session, I'm going to talk about areas to action for SaaS optimization and where you can start your journey in that optimization. I know it's a really long title, but essentially when it comes to managing your software estate, there's so much data available to you that it can be overwhelming to know where and how to start. I'm hoping in today's session, we can translate some of that data into meaningful insights with some prioritized action that will help you realize your desired business outcomes. First, a little bit about me. My name is Russ Eicholtz. I've been in ITAM since 2006. I live up in Fargo, North Dakota, and I'm really excited to be here. All right, let's get on with the agenda. So today we're going to talk a little bit about defining what SaaS optimization and some of the benefits are, some of the best practices with a little bit of tweaking there going on, where to start, no longer counting the beans, which I'll get into in a little bit, and then some of the key takeaways. All right, so first we have to define what SaaS optimization is first, right? So when I look at SaaS optimization today, to me, it refers to optimizing your SaaS spend and usage. And we need to start asking types of questions such as, are you maximizing everything you can out of every license that you've provisioned or spent money on? Chances are, probably not. We also can ask things like, are you provisioned at the right feature, functionality, licensing tier for each individual user and team within your organization? Again, the answer is probably not, at least not with every single SaaS app that's currently out in your environment. And finally, are you spending the right amount of money on each SaaS application or license? Again, based on experience, this tells me no. Companies simply do not have access to what their price points and other benchmarking metrics might be. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key benefits. And I'm just going to rattle some of these off for the sake of time, but obviously understanding what your SaaS applications are in use, being able to identify those SaaS applications with individuals and teams, and also based on team spend. You can look to cancel redundant or duplicate applications. We can look to recover wasted spend where we've maybe over-provisioned and people aren't utilizing those licenses. We can also look to redeploy underutilized subscriptions. We can look to consolidate SaaS contracts and vendors. And as we probably have all experienced within the last couple of years, the SaaS application threshold has just gone through the ceiling. A lot of SaaS apps have found their way into our environments, and now we need to maybe rein that stuff back in. Maybe not with an iron fist, but we need to have some sort of control over that. And then obviously with the proliferation of SaaS apps in our organizations, we need to start understanding what is authorized, what is unauthorized, and what types of risks, especially around security, have those SaaS apps brought upon the organization. All right. So some of the best practices, and these are very high level, but without a clear understanding of what apps our employees are using, it's impossible to address things like shadow IT, security, and compliance risks that come along with all of that, right? So when I use a tool like Zylo, I can get complete visibility into what's actually being used in the org and who has the licenses and who's been provisioned licenses for those apps and what access and how they're starting to use those. This is literally the first step if you're going to make a go at SaaS optimization. And without that optimization, your spend can quickly get out of control. You might even not know what you're spending on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year cost when it comes to SaaS. You could be over-provisioning to users who don't need them at all. You could be, and you could even be provisioning really expensive licenses to users that aren't even using them. They're not using those premium or pro functionality or features, and yet they might have a $5,000 license attached to them. Chances are you might even have users that have access to duplicative, redundant, excessive software, right? What do I mean by that? Well, they might be using, you might have Box, you might have Google Drive, you might have OneDrive, and you might have all these other storage uh, applications available, and not know how they're being utilized. I wouldn't want, if my desired choice was to use OneDrive as a company, I wouldn't want a bunch of people using Box or Google Drive or other means to store data that I don't have access to, that I can't control through my subscriptions and my policies and process, right? Now I can use the tools like Zylo to discover that stuff and start determining which ones might be underutilized, pose a risk, or decide on how to approach those applications. Interestingly enough, another optimization best practice that doesn't necessarily get utilized today, but that is using the data that we have to budget for our future growth. So if we've been going through and optimizing and we're doing data analysis and footprint analysis, we should be able to budget and help other departments with that growth. If we have the visibility into which teams are using these licenses, right, that allows us to help them right size their SaaS costs and potentially, with chargebacks and things like that. And finally, just really high level, automating those workflows, right? If you're going to be truly dynamic in this space, you need to have some sort of automated workflow that you can manage your licenses, provision, deprovision, downgrade, upgrade, et cetera, so you can save time on that license provision and the actual license management, and allow the tool to do some of that work for you. All right, a couple little pictures here. All right, where to start? This is kind of where the rubber meets the road here. I'm just going to go ahead and build out this slide so we don't get too trapped here. So when I'm working with a customer, I have to determine where to start, right? Where's that preferred starting line with any customer? So instead of going through every single individual SaaS application that's out there, talking about its relevance, looking at how much it costs and all this type of stuff, that's very time consuming for me, right? So I try to prioritize and be a little bit more fluid in the process. So for example, I might start off by looking at SaaS applications that are the top 10 spend within the company, or top 10% spend in the company, right? And start my research and my data analysis there, right? I might also take a look at upcoming renewal dates. So let's take a couple examples here. Office 365, right? There's a monthly subscription cost to that. I might have options to go up or down on a monthly basis, but my renewal might be a little ways out, and I might not have all the data I need aggregated over the last 90 to 120 days. So I might have to wait for that timeline to kind of catch up. So in between, I might look at other renewals that are coming up, maybe I say about 90 to 120 days out, where we can make take actionable steps to make changes or determine whether we need to upgrade or down level, go up a tier, those types of areas, right? And so I can work on that information and that renewal date in advance and very proactive. In addition to those two things, I might also work with a customer to conduct what I call a reclamation campaign. And it could be a very small campaign. It doesn't have to tackle all the users in the environment or all the devices or all the SaaS apps, right? I might look to say, hey, let's tackle PDF or the Google storage, OneDrive, those types of things. And what I'm going to look for there is, what is the usage of those applications? Are the users actually using the application, right? What are the metrics and the licenses tied to that? And based on my analysis, I might go ahead and conduct a reclamation campaign where we're going to go ahead and identify the non-usage and pull that back, deprovision, pull those licenses back, and record that we've done that, right? And we can utilize Zylo to do that actual workflow for us through automation, through email campaigns, etc. There's a multiple ways to do it depending upon the vendor and the publisher. So those are three things that I would start off right away. And the reason why I do the reclamation campaign is I can create quick wins. Time to value is very short when it comes to that type of campaign. So the other things that I might look at as I'm sitting down with a customer is trending. And trending is something that we didn't really have in traditional ITAM prior to BI getting really good and people getting good skill sets in terms of pulling that data out, putting it in BI, swizzling it up, and producing something that we can actually consume and take action on, right? SaaS tools of today have that built in. So I can start analyzing usage patterns, comparing that and benchmarking it against number of users, the cost of the app, to really find out that value of that SaaS application. I might also look at logins and the overall feature functionality usage per user or even per team to determine, hey, am I in the right licensing tier? Can I right size? Is there opportunity here, right? So those are some of the things I would look at from a trending perspective as well. And then lastly, and I always ask this question, but it always inevitably comes up, and I always ask who's on first, who's buying what, right? And sometimes it's an open-ended question, and we don't necessarily need to know. So we have to help go research and find those individuals and those business units that are buying these SaaS applications, understand what they're using them for, right? And what terms did they sign up for? Look, people out there in HR, finance, security, accounting, what have you, they don't always look at the terms of the licenses and the agreements that they're signing up for. And they definitely don't look to see if there's been any changes to those terms in a proactive manner. That's where ITAM can, as ITAM professionals, we can come in and assist with identifying that, being proactive, and updating them with how the SaaS app is currently being utilized. And then finally, who's on first, right? It's a centralized, decentralized argument sometimes within organizations. SaaS has definitely exploded, and it's kind of created this decentralized environment where people are able to get the software they need or want to do their job, right? But not a lot of that information makes it back to an ITAM organization. So what I've always said in traditional ITAM, as well as now more than ever, is that ITAM, as ITAM professionals, right, we don't necessarily have to bring it into a centralized spot and rule with an iron fist. But what we should be doing is building that bridge between finance and operations and help understand how we can help all business units within the organization be successful with their SaaS vision, right? So we'll go on to the next. And again, I'm just going to build this out. I talked about a little bit earlier, it's not about counting the beans. Traditional ITAM, right? It was a lot of organizations get to this point where they simply are counting the beans. We've got our licenses on one side, and we got our installs, our users, our metrics, whether it's processor or core or whatever on the other side, and we meld them together, right? And that's counting the beans. It's just providing compliance and determining whether I true up or true down or what have you, right? Maybe being audit ready. With SaaS, it's not about counting the beans anymore. There's so much more involved with it. And much less about compliance or the traditional ITAM programs, right? So I lay it out into three different areas. We've got automate, enable, and establish, right? I'm going to go ahead and just build out this first part here. So first things first, and this isn't a plug on tools or whatever, but technology allows us to get that visibility quickly, right? So invest in a tool that is able to help with automation, frees up your time. Most importantly, it's got to be able to capture that spend and that usage. The financial spend is going to drive a lot of the action that you have within your organization here, right? But it allows you to do things like right sizing and benchmarking, right? Where we can identify those opportunities to right size, as well as ultimately understand the value of your SaaS applications, right? That allows us to be enabled, especially with our renewals and our negotiations. I talked about those earlier, but it's worth repeating that with a data-driven approach, right, you can figure out whether your next contract needs to include more or fewer licenses, changes to the licenses themselves, whether you're going up in premium features or down, right? And keep in mind that the data that we are bringing back using these tool sets is closer to real time than traditional ITAM programs. And that gives us much more granular usage data, which puts us as ITAM professionals in the driver's seat when it comes to negotiations, right? One of the other things, and I'll touch on this very quickly, is around enablement of employees. And oftentimes we see through these tools that we might have 100 licenses, or 100 provision licenses, but only 80% of the users have even actually logged in or done anything with that particular app, right? Is that because they don't know it exists, they don't know what they're doing with it, or they have no education or training on how to best utilize that piece of software, right? So we can be able to provide that back. We're not going to train these guys on how to use the tool. We could provide that back to the business owner, right, and say, hey, we noticed, hey, your users aren't using this piece of software. If you intend to keep it, let's get them trained up on it, right? Let's increase that end user satisfaction, right? I talked a little bit about security and different workflows. Again, that's an enablement piece. So we definitely want to highlight that. And then finally, on the establish policies and process, and I can feel people rolling their eyes when they think about policies and process. But one of the main things that I want you to think about here is think about your customer data, right? You're using these SaaS applications and customer data might be coming in and out of them, and what you're modifying and all that type of stuff. You want your own data out there floating around, right? So you have to think about your customer data, making sure it's secure, it's private, and in control, right, with regard to these SaaS applications. And that bears having a policy or process there. You could also create policy around vendor performance and resolution, right? KPIs, SLAs, what if there's downtime? What's the resolution process? Because the last thing you need is any damage to your organization reputation, any downtime that affects performance, and any costly fines that might result as well. And then finally, and this is probably the biggest point on establish, is that you need to establish ROI reporting, time to value, cost savings, whether they're hard or soft. In today's environment and economy, C-levels are looking at where we can cut costs, right? Instead of cutting people, let's cut down on the SaaS spend. Stop wasting money where we don't need to be wasting money. And lastly, and I had to put this in here, proper governance will give you the basis to make decisions based on complete, correct, current information, which should give you confidence. And I call that the 4 C's associated with proper governance. All right, key takeaways as we wrap up here really quickly. It's not about counting the beans. Prioritize based on your renewals, your spend, and your time to value. Look for trending and future growth, plan for it. Define success with other BUs. Establish those relationships with InfoSec, with finance, with HR. Record and report your ROI at all times. And finally, just remember the governance and the 4 C's. We definitely want you all to be confident as you go forward on this journey with SaaS optimization. And finally, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure being at SaaSMe 2023. Love it here, and I can't wait to talk with you all in the virtual breakouts. Thank you.